The main viewing screen on the command deck showed the end of Earth's orbital defense fleet. It was not a messy explosion. It was a quiet, graceful failure. The alien ships, called the Valkyrie, moved like dancers. They were slender and silver, and they flew in perfect, silent patterns. They did not fire wildly. Their weapons shot thin, blue lines of light. Each line hit exactly the right spot on a human ship. An engine would go dark. A weapon system would power down. The human ships became silent, floating metal, waiting to be collected. Captain Park J watched it all with a cold feeling in his stomach. The Valkyrie did not want to destroy. They wanted to prove a point. They had done this in 12 other star systems, the report said. They won wars with perfect, logical movements. They understood combat so completely that fighting them felt like trying to argue with a math problem. They have taken the Lagrange 3 station, Lieutenant Kim Soo-ji said from her station. Her voice was calm, but her knuckles were white where she gripped the edge of her screen. They bypassed every firewall. It's like they had the blueprints. They probably did, Jay replied. They study. They learn. Then they act. On another screen, Sergeant Choi Min-soo shook his head. His face was smudged with dirt from loading heavy plasma batteries. They fight like robots. No fire, no passion. It's boring to watch. It is effective, Soo-ji corrected him gently. Their casualty rate is near zero. Ours is near zero as well, because they disable, not kill. They are efficient. That was the word, efficient. The Valkyrie communication, when it came, was the same. A tall, feathered creature appeared on screen. Its skin looked like polished stone, and fine, glass-like feathers shifted on its head and shoulders. Its eyes were like dark crystals. People of Earth, it said, its voice a smooth, toneless sound. We are the Valkyrie. Your violent history shows a deep misunderstanding of conflict. We have analyzed your military strategies. We have mapped your tactical responses. Resistance will result in no loss of life, only a peaceful transition to a more logical order. Stand down. The message ended. Jay turned away from the screen. Arrogant, he muttered. Is it arrogance if it's true? Soo-ji asked, pulling up more data. Look at New Manila. Their forces landed. The local garrison used standard urban defense tactics. The Valkyrie neutralized them in 17 minutes. They predicted every move. Jay paced the small deck. His unit, Hammerfall, was Earth's best. They were the last response, the sharpest weapon. But watching the Valkyrie work made him feel dull and slow. How do you fight an enemy that already knows your next move? A few days later, Hammerfall got its orders. A Valkyrie ground force was securing a major fusion power plant in what was left of Daegu. Their job was not to destroy the plant, but to take it intact. Intelligence said it was a small group, a perfect test for Hammerfall's skills. This is it, Min-soo said, slamming a magazine into his heavy rifle. Finally, something to shoot at that shoots back. I'm tired of watching their ballet. The dropship raced low over the scarred landscape. From above, Jay could see the results of the Valkyrie campaign. Cities were not burned. They were quiet, peaceful even. The Valkyrie vehicles moved down streets in neat lines. There was no screaming, no panic, just a terrible, orderly silence. They landed 2 kilometers from the plant. The plan was standard. Approach from the east, using the old industrial canal for cover. Soo-ji would use a drone to mark targets. Min-soo would set up a firing position on a rooftop. Jay would lead a small team to flank the main entrance. It was a good plan. It had worked a dozen times before. They moved like shadows, communication done with hand signals. Soo-ji's voice was a soft whisper in their earpieces. I have visual. 5 Valkyrie at the main gate. 2 more on the elevated walkway. No thermal signs of hidden units. Copy, Jay whispered. Moving to position. They were halfway to the flanking point when the world turned blue. No loud blast, just a sudden hum and a wave of energy that washed over them. Jay's armor locked up, his systems overridden. He fell to his knees, frozen. All around him, his squad members were doing the same, collapsing like puppets with cut strings. From behind a silent, hovering vehicle, the Valkyrie emerged. They walked on slender legs, their movements smooth and unhurried. One of them stood before Jay. It was not the one from the broadcast. This one had a crest of red-tipped feathers. Captain Park Jay, it said, its voice identical to the first. It knew his name. Your approach was predicted with a 97% probability. Your tactical choice of the canal was the most logical, given your training. You are very consistent. Jay strained against the energy field holding him. It was useless. He could only watch as the Valkyrie soldiers calmly disarmed his team. They did not use force. They simply took the weapons, placing them in a neat pile. What is your goal? Jay spat out. Order, the Valkyrie said. We understand combat. We see it as a problem of physics and psychology. You humans treat it like a storm, loud, emotional, wasteful. We are ending the storm. You will be taken to a holding facility. You will not be harmed. Min Su, held down next to Jay, growled. Come and fight me without your tricks. 1-on-1. The Valkyrie turned its crystal eyes to Min Su. It processed the words. An interesting request. It is, however, illogical. The goal is to win, not to fight. We have won. They were loaded onto a Valkyrie transport. It was clean, quiet, and smelled of ozone. There were no restraints. The doors simply sealed. The Valkyrie did not see them as a threat anymore. They were solved problems. As the transport lifted off, Jay looked out a small window. He saw the fusion plant, perfectly intact. He saw Valkyrie moving, their work already done. He saw no smoke, no fire, no sign of a struggle. It was the cleanest defeat of his life. He looked at his team. Suji was analyzing the transport's interior with her eyes, searching for a weakness. Min Su was staring at the floor, his face red with a quiet, shameful fury. The others looked confused, defeated. The Valkyrie had understood their combat perfectly. They had moved exactly where Hammerfall was going to be. They had used the perfect tool to stop them without a single bruise. Jay leaned his head back against the cool wall. The cold feeling in his stomach was now a hard, heavy stone. How do you fight an enemy that turns your own strength into a weakness? How do you fight an enemy that wins without making you bleed? He did not have an answer. Not yet. But as he watched the silent, ordered world pass below, one thought burned in his mind. To beat an enemy that understands everything about fighting, you must become something they cannot understand. You must become something not even you yourself understand. The holding facility was not a prison. It was a model of perfect, clean order. The walls were a soft white, the light constant and shadowless. The air smelled of nothing at all. The silence was the deepest Park Jay had ever known. They were not in cells. They were in open, spacious rooms with simple cots. A clear energy field, like shimmering water, blocked the doorway. There were no guards in sight. The Valkyrie did not need to watch them. Their system was the guard. The first day was for processing. A silent, floating orb entered the room. A beam of light scanned each member of Hammerfall from head to toe. It noted every scar, every old injury. Another machine dispensed food, a bland, nutrient-rich paste that was exactly what their bodies needed, and nothing more. Sergeant Choi Min-soo stared at the paste. They can't even give us something to chew? This is food for babies. It is efficient, Lieutenant Kim Soo-ji said, eating without expression. No waste. No pleasure. Just function. Jay ate the paste. He had to keep his strength. He watched everything. He saw the other human prisoners in their own open rooms across a central courtyard. Soldiers, mostly. They looked dazed, like animals in a very clean zoo. They did not shout. They spoke in low, confused voices. The place stole your will to yell. On the second day, the Valkyrie commander came. It was the one from the broadcasts. It stood outside the energy field, its hands held behind its back. I am Kree Val, it said. You are the unit called Hammerfall. Your file indicates you are a high-priority specimen group. Your cohesion and skill rate are notable. We're not specimens, Jay said, standing to face it. You are now, Kree Val replied, its head tilting. Your combat style is the final, most advanced example of human violent logic. By studying you, we complete our model. Your species chapter on war will be closed. Min Soo stepped forward, his face hard. You want to study me? Turn off this field and we'll have a lesson. Kree Val's crystal eyes focused on Min Soo. Emotional response. Predictable. Your profile indicates a 19% chance you would make such a statement. It is recorded. The Valkyrie turned as if to leave. Wait, Soo-ji said, her voice clear. She had been sitting quietly on her cot. What is your goal here? Not just for us, for Earth. Kree Val paused. It seemed to consider whether answering was logical. Your planet's resources are poorly managed. Your societies are unstable due to your violent nature. We will administer. We will create order. In 3 generations, the concept of war will be a forgotten illness. You will thank us. You can't just remove fighting from people, Jay said. We can, Kree Val said simply. We have. We understand the triggers, the group dynamics, the resource competitions. We remove the cause. The effect disappears. It is simple. After Kree Val left, a heavy gloom settled on the room. The Valkyrie logic was a wall around them, higher and smoother than any physical wall. Hope came from a strange place. It came from a mistake. Later that day, a different Valkyrie came to their room. It was smaller, its feathers less polished. It carried a scanner to take more readings. As it worked, a sharp, pulsing tone came from a device on its belt. It was a sound like fast, clicking crystals. The Valkyrie soldier froze for a second. Its hand went to the device. In that moment of distraction, its other hand, holding the scanner, twitched. The scanner's beam hit the floor instead of Soo-ji. It was a small error. The beam moved back to her instantly. But Jay saw it. He saw the tiny, jerky movement. He saw the soldier's posture change for a second a slight, droop in its shoulders. It finished its work and left quickly. Did you see that? Jay whispered to Soo-ji. The misalignment? Yes, she said, her eyes alive with thought. It was distracted. The signal was a priority alert. It caused a physical reaction. They made a mistake, Min Soo said, scoffing. So what? Everyone makes mistakes. No, Soo-ji said. They don't. Their entire civilization is built on not making mistakes. That was the first flawed movement I've seen from them. It was emotional. It was annoyed by the interruption. Jay felt the heavy stone in his stomach crack a little. They could be distracted. They could feel annoyance. The second clue was bigger. It happened in the courtyard. A human prisoner, a man from a different unit, had a bad coughing fit. His cough was loud and wet, a horrible, messy human sound. He coughed and coughed, unable to stop. Kree Val was walking through the courtyard at that moment, explaining the daily schedule to a group of new prisoners. The ragged, Uncontrolled sound of the coughing cut through its smooth speech. Krival stopped. It turned its head toward the coughing man. Its graceful hand made a sharp, cutting motion. 2 Valkyrie guards moved swiftly to the man's room. They did not touch him. They released a gas that made him fall into a deep sleep. The coughing stopped. The perfect silence returned. But for that one moment, Jay had been watching Krival's face. In those crystal eyes, he saw it. A flash. A tiny, bright spark of pure, unfiltered irritation. It was gone in a second, smoothed away. But it had been there. The messy, unpredictable noise of a sick human had gotten under its perfect skin. That night, they huddled on Jay's cot, speaking in the lowest whispers. They understand systems, Suji said, drawing invisible lines on the sheet. They understand planned combat. But what about things you can't plan for? What about chaos? Chaos is just a mess, Min-Su whispered back. Chaos is a weapon they don't have a file for, Jay said, the idea foaming like a sharp, cold blade in his mind. They predicted our attack because we followed our training. We were logical soldiers. What if we stop being logical? What does that mean? Min-Su asked. Suji answered, a faint smile on her lips. It means we stop giving them what they understand. They have a model for Sergeant Choi Min-Su, the heavy weapons specialist. They don't have a model for a madman with a pipe. They understand a prisoner who plans an escape, Jay said. Do they understand a prisoner who just starts screaming and throwing his food at the wall? Min-Su's eyes slowly widened. You want us to act crazy? I want us to act human, Jay said. Fully, messily, unpredictably human. Their whole system is built on predicting sane military behavior. So we give them insanity. We give them noise. They began to plan, but not like soldiers. They planned like artists of chaos. They noted the timing of the floating orb that scanned them. They watched the single guard who patrolled the far end of the hall every 90 minutes. They studied the energy field, not for its frequency, but for where it met the floor. Was there a tiny gap where something wet could be poured? They were not planning a battle. They were planning an infection. They would infect the perfect, clean order of the Valkyrie with the dirty, screaming virus of human unpredictability. The stone in Jay's stomach was gone. In its place was a low, steady fire. The Valkyrie thought they had captured Hammerfall. They thought they had put the final piece into their puzzle. They did not know they had brought a live wire into their quiet, logical machine. They did not know that their perfect understanding of combat was about to meet something they could never model. They had studied the storm and thought they could calm it. They did not know that Park Jae was about to show them what happens when the storm is pulled inside the house. The plan started with a scream, not a battle cry. It was a long, wordless, raw sound of frustration. Sergeant Choi Min-Su made it, pacing in their room like a caged bear. He screamed until his face was red. He slammed his open hands against the soft, unbreakable walls. The effect was immediate. The perfect silence of the facility was shattered. The energy field at their doorway shimmered, and the small floating observation orb zipped closer. It hovered, analyzing the sound, the biometrics. Min-Su was giving it data it had no file for. Pure, undirected rage. Lieutenant Kim Soo-ji watched the orb. She did not look at Min-Su. She lay on her cot, facing the wall, her body shaking. To the orb, it looked like she was sobbing. In reality, her fingers were tracing a tiny, hidden seam in the wall panel she had found. She was not crying. She was working. Captain Park Jae sat cross-legged on the floor. He began to talk. He did not talk to his team. He talked to himself. He talked about his grandmother's old apartment in Bizerne. He described the smell of the sea market and the sound of the seagulls. He spoke in a low, rambling monotone. The orb drifted towards him, trying to parse the meaning, the threat level. There was none. It was just noise. Human memory noise. For hours, they performed. Min Su would yell. Su-ji would fake a coughing fit. Jay would hum an old, off-key folk song. They broke the routine. They refused the nutrient paste at the scheduled time, then an hour later complained of hunger pangs. They slept during the activity period and paced during the rest period. The Volukri system began to show tiny cracks. The orb moved more often, darting between them. Its smooth path became jagged. Once, two orbs arrived at the same time, circling each other in a confused pattern before one left. The real test came with the guard. The single Volukri guard patrolled the corridor every 90 minutes. Its walk was a model of efficiency, each step the same length, its head turning at precise points to scan the room's dot as it passed their doorway this time. Jay was ready. He had saved a small amount of his water ration, not to drink. As the guard's head turned toward them, Jay threw the water. It was not an attack. It was a childish gesture. The water splashed against the energy field with a sizzle and fell to the floor in a small, dirty puddle right where the guard would step. The guard did not break its stride. Its crystal foot stepped directly into the wet patch. There was a microscopic slip, a tiny, almost invisible jerk in its smooth motion. It did not fall. It did not even look down. But its rhythm was broken. For the next 3 steps, its movements were a fraction less perfect. It was adjusting dot. Su-ji saw it. It doesn't know how to process a petty annoyance, she whispered later. Its programming is for threats, weapons, organized attacks. A wet floor is beneath its notice. But its body still had to react. They were wearing down the machine with grains of sand. The escape happened because of a mistake, but not their mistake. A priority alert sounded through the facility, the same sharp clicking tone they had heard before. This time, it was loud and persistent. Somewhere, something was not according to plan. For a full 3 minutes, the observation orb did not visit their room. The patrol guard did not appear. "Now," Jay said, his voice suddenly clear and sharp. All the madness fell from his face. Su-ji was already at the wall panel. Using a hardened plastic spoon she had secretly snapped in two, she worked at the seam. The panel was not meant to be opened. It was smooth and sealed, but it was also maintenance access. And where there is access, there are weaknesses. She pushed, pried, and with a quiet click, the small panel popped open. Inside was a nest of glowing cables and a thin pipe carrying warm air. "The field generator is in the ceiling above the door," she whispered. "Its power runs through this wall. If we can overload it." Min Su reached into the opening. He ignored the delicate cables. He wrapped his thick fingers around the warm air pipe. "This looks important," he grunted. With a fierce, steady pressure, he bent it. The thin metal groaned and kinked. Hot air began to hiss into the wall cavity. Nothing happened for a moment. Then, the light in their room flickered. The energy field at the doorway shimmered wildly, like a disturbed pond. It didn't vanish, but it became unstable, flashing on and off in a rapid, unpredictable pattern. "Go!" Jay shouted. They didn't hesitate. Timing the flickers, they ran one by one through the doorway. The energy field stung like 1,000 bees where it touched them, but they were through. They were in the silent, white corridor. This was not part of any Volukri prediction model. This was not a tactical breach. This was a chaotic, noisy, mechanical failure caused by a bent pipe. It was beneath their notice until it was too late. They did not head for the main exit. That would be predicted. Instead, Su-ji led them toward the source of the warm air, the atmospheric processing plant. "It will be hot, loud, and full of moving parts," she said. "The worst environment for their sensors." They ran, their soft prison shoes making no sound. They passed other rooms where human prisoners stared, shocked into silence. Jay made a sharp gesture to them. "Stay. Be ready." Alarms finally began to sound, a soft, chiming tone. It was not a siren. It was a polite notification that something was irregular. 2 Volukri guards appeared at the end of the corridor. They raised their hands, from which glowing energy fields began to form. They were preparing to contain, not kill. Minsu didn't fire a weapon. He had no weapon. He saw a large decorative vase on a pedestal, part of the Volukri attempt to understand human aesthetics. He picked it up and threw it not at the guards, but at the wall between them. It shattered against a light panel, plunging that section of the hall into straubing. Broken light. The guards paused, their sensors disrupted. Jay led his team through a service door. They burst into the atmospheric plant. It was exactly as Suji said, a roaring, steaming jungle of pipes and giant fans. The heat was immense. The noise was a physical force. A Volukri guard was there, monitoring controls. It turned, its smooth movements looking out of place in the chaos. It raised its arm. Jay didn't charge it. He jumped onto a control console and kicked a large lever. He had no idea what it did. That was the point. With a scream of metal, a pressure valve released. A jet of superheated steam erupted from a pipe with the force of a cannon, missing the Volukri, but hitting the wall behind it. The wall cracked. A secondary pipe, carrying something cold, ruptured. A mix of steam and freezing coolant filled the air with a deafening, shrieking fog. The Volukri guard stumbled back, its crystal eyes clouded, its perfect feathers plastered down. It tried to aim, but its sensors were blinded by the thermal chaos. Minsu grabbed a metal maintenance bar and swung it like a club. He didn't aim for the head. He aimed for the long, slender leg. There was a sound like cracking ceramic. The guard fell, a sharp, pained cry escaping its beak, the first sound of pain Jay had ever heard from them. Blue, viscous fluid seeped from the broken joint. They didn't stop. They crashed through a grate and found themselves in the city's old maintenance tunnels, a dark, wet world of dripping pipes and forgotten cables. The perfect white silence was gone, replaced by the drip of water and their own ragged breathing. They were free. But they were not safe. They were covered in grime, stung by energy fields, and one of them was bleeding from a cut on the arm. They were, for the first time since the invasion. Messy. J looked at the blood on his soldier's arm, a dark red against the dirt. Then he thought of the blue fluid on the floor of the processing plant. The Volukri had made them prisoners. They had made them feel powerless. But in doing so, they had made a critical error. They had shown Park J that their perfect understanding had a blind spot. They understood the soldier. They did not understand the savage. And now the savages were loose in the dark, and they were very, very angry. The Undercity was a different world. It was dark, wet, and smelled of rust and old decay. Water drimed from pipes high above, creating small, constant splashes in the dark pools on the ground. It was the opposite of the Volukri world of white silence. This place was all noise and shadow. For 3 days, Hammerfall moved through the dripping tunnels. They ate old protein bars from emergency kits they found in a maintenance locker. They drank filtered rainwater. They did not move like soldiers on a mission. They moved like animals, listening for any sound that was too clean, too precise. Lieutenant Kin Suji's mind was their greatest weapon now. She studied the Volukri patterns from below. Using a stolen datapad she had jury-rigged to tap into a low-level utility line, she watched their communications. They were not looking for Hammerfall in the tunnels. They were searching the city above, scanning for tactical signatures, for organized movement. They think we will try to regroup with command, she whispered, her face glowing in the dim light of the screen. They are looking for a soldier. We must stop being soldiers. Captain Park J nodded. He understood. The Valkyrie had a file on Captain Park J, the tactical leader. They had no file for what he was becoming. Their first attack was not on soldiers. It was on a logistics node. A small, automated Valkyrie station in a sub-basement regulated power to a city sector. It was guarded by a single drone. Min Su wanted to smash it. Jay shook his head. Watch. He found a pipe leaking a slow, sticky fluid coolant or lubricant. It didn't matter. He poured it across the floor in front of the station's main door. Then he and Min Su began to make noise. They yelled at each other in the dark, arguing about nothing, their voices echoing. They banged pipes against the walls. The Valkyrie drone detected the noise and the human heat signatures. It glided smoothly from its station to investigate, following its protocol. Its sensors were fixed on the two humans. It did not look down. It crossed the slick patch. Its anti-gravity field whined. The sticky fluid messed with its precise field calibration. It wobbled in the air, dipping suddenly. As it struggled to correct, Suji stepped from the shadows and shoved a long metal rod into its intake vent. The drone emitted a sharp digital screech and crashed to the floor, its lights dying. They didn't attack the station. Suji plugged her datapad into it. She didn't try to steal information. Instead, she uploaded a single looping file, a loud, screeching recording of distorted traditional guitar music mixed with the sound of human laughter. She corrupted the power management schedules, making lights in the sector above flicker on and off at random intervals for the next 12 hours. It was a petty, annoying act of sabotage. It had no military value, but it spread chaos. The Valkyrie response was confused. They sent a cleanup team, not a combat team. They were treating it as a malfunction. Hammerfall's war became a war of itches, not wounds. They loosened bolts on elevated walkways, making them tremble. They released small, harmless but foul-smelling gases into air circulation vents. Suji learned to hack into public address systems, not to make announcements, but to play loud. Dissonant sounds in the middle of the Valkyrie rest cycle, the clang of pots. Babies crying, nails on a CHAL, KBOARD. They attacked the Valkyrie sense of order. Their greatest victory was against a convoy. They observed from a ruined building as 3 Valkyrie transport vehicles moved down a wide avenue. The vehicles floated in a perfect line, keeping exact distance. Min-Su, perched high above with his heavy rifle, did not shoot the vehicles. Jay gave him a different target. See the ancient lampposts? The old, decorative ones. Min-Su grinned. He fired 3 times. The plasma bolts melted the bases of 3 lampposts. They did not fall immediately. They groaned, bent, and then collapsed in sequence, like dominoes, directly onto the path of the convoy. The lead vehicle stopped perfectly. The second vehicle adjusted. The third vehicle had to swerve, breaking the perfect formation. It did not crash, but the smooth, orderly procession was broken. The vehicle sat there, blocked by messy, twisted metal. It was a simple traffic jam. To the Valkyrie, it was a profound disruption. They had no procedure for it. From the shadows, Jay watched a Valkyrie officer step out. He could see its agitation in the sharp, bird-like movements of its head. It was not scanning for enemies. It was looking at the illogical heap of metal with what seemed like disbelief. This was the war now. They were teaching the Valkyrie about inconvenience, about frustration, about mess. They grew bolder. They learned the blue blood meant the Valkyrie could feel pain. They learned that their crystal feathers, while hard, could be snapped. Their greatest strength, their unity, their shared logic became a weakness. If you confused one, you confused them all. The final test came at a central power station. It was more guarded, a place of real strategic value. Jay knew they could not take it, but they could make it a lesson. They infiltrated through the old sewer access. The station hummed with clean, powerful energy. Valkyrie technicians moved silently among the consoles. Jay's target was not the main reactor. It was the control room for the station's internal climate and lighting. Suji hacked the system while Minsu rigged a small, crude explosive from leftover chemicals and a timer. He placed it not to destroy, but to create smoke and a loud, percussive bang in a disconnected duct. The explosion was more sound than fury. It echoed through the station like a thunderclap at a library. The Valkyrie technicians froze. Their heads snapped toward the sound. Alarms chimed, but they were alarms for system failures, not attacks. In that moment of frozen confusion, Jay stepped into the main control room. He did not fire his stolen weapon. He walked directly toward the Valkyrie in charge. It was Krevel. Recognition flashed in Krevel's crystal eyes. Park Jay, you are behaving irrationally. This station is vital. Your actions are without tactical sense. I know, Jay said, and kept walking. Krevel raised a hand, an energy field beginning to form. Jay didn't break stride. At the last second, he dropped and slid on the smooth floor, like a baseball player, right past Krevel. He was not attacking the commander. He was attacking the console next to it. He slammed the butt of his rifle into the main lighting control panel. Sparks flew. The room was plunged into emergency red light, and a deafening, pulsing alarm blared a harsh, ugly human alarm sound Suji had programmed in the dark. Flashing chaos, Krevel turned, its graceful form disoriented. Jay rose from the floor. He didn't shoot. He swung his rifle like a club. He didn't aim for the body. He aimed for Krevel's slender, multi-jointed arm that controlled its energy field. The impact made a sound like breaking glass. Krevel let out a sharp, pained cry and staggered back. Jay stepped in close. He saw the shock in the alien's eyes, not just from pain, but from the method. This was not combat. This was a brawl. With his other hand, Jay threw a small, paint-filled capsule he had made from trash. It burst against Krevel's chest, splattering bright, fluorescent orange across its pristine feathers and crystal torso. A mark of shame. A stain of chaos. You understand combat, Jay snarled over the blaring alarm. Do you understand this? He didn't wait for an answer. He turned and ran, his team melting back into the service ducts as Valkyrie guards rushed into the red-lit chaos. Outside, in the safe, familiar darkness of the tunnels, they stopped to breathe. Minsu was laughing a low, gritty laugh. Did you see its face? It looked insulted. Suji was checking her pad. The station is operating at 60%. They have multiple system errors. Non-critical, but pervasive. It will take them days to fix the mess. Jay leaned against the wet wall. His hands were trembling, not from fear, but from a strange, wild energy. He looked at his knuckles. They were bruised. On them, he saw a smear of pale, shimmering blue. The Valkyrie had made them bleed first, in their own way. They had made them feel the wound of capture and helplessness. Now, Park Jay had made a commander of the Valkyrie bleed. Not just its body, but its perfect, logical mind. He had stained it with color and noise and pain. The lesson was simple and written in blue and orange. You can understand the science of war, but you cannot understand the chaos of a cornered beast. And now the beast was loose, and it was teaching a bloody, messy lesson of its own. The broadcast from the Valkyrie High Command was firm, but a new word had entered their vocabulary: illogical. They spoke of unpredictable organic interference and systemic contamination. They did not say they were losing. They said the equation had become unbalanced. To Park Jae, listening from a stolen radio in a damp basement, it was the sweetest confession of defeat he had ever heard. But the war was not over. The Valkyrie were not retreating. They were adapting. Their patrols now moved in tighter, more reactive formations. Their scans looked for biological signs of stress, for erratic heartbeats in the ruins. They were building a new model. One based on the chaotic data Hammerfall had given them. J knew they had one chance left. They could not win a war of attrition. The Valkyrie had ships in the sky, endless resources. Humanity had only its spirit, and that was burning low. They needed a final statement. Not an attack to destroy, but a performance to shatter a worldview. He chose the Old Seoul Plaza. It was not a military target. It was a symbol. Before the invasion, it was a place of gatherings, of festivals, of life. The Valkyrie had made it the center of their new, orderly administration. They had erected a tall, smooth spire of white crystal there, a monument to their logical peace. "This is where we end it," Jay told his tired team. Suji's eyes were shadowed from lack of sleep. Min-Soo had a fresh burn on his arm. They were all thin, moving on will alone. "We are not going to destroy the spire. We are going to hold the ground around it. We are going to show them what they cannot control." It was a trap, and they were the bait that they spread the word through the underground networks. They did not ask for soldiers. They asked for anyone who still had anger. They asked for noisemakers, for painters, for anyone who could scream. The call went out not as an order, but as an invitation to a different kind of fight. As dawn broke, Hammerfall took their positions in the ruins around the plaza. They were not hidden. They were in the open. Jay stood by a shattered fountain. Suji sat on the steps of an old bank, her datapad open. Min-Soo leaned against a broken statue, his heavy rifle across his knees. The Valkyrie response was swift and precise. Silvery ships descended, blocking the sky. Rows of Valkyrie soldiers emerged, their weapons glowing. They formed a perfect circle around the plaza, a wall of crystal and light. In the center, before the white spire, Kreval stood. One of its arms was held in a rigid support. The crystal beneath stained a faint, ugly blue where Jay had broken it. "Park Jae." Kreval's voice amplified, clean and toneless. "You have forced an update to our models. We now account for irrational, sacrificial behavior. You are surrounded. Your statistical chance of survival is 0. This display is unnecessary." Jay smiled. He picked up a rusted metal pipe and struck the side of the fountain. The clang was loud and ugly. "This is not a display of survival," he shouted back. "It is a display of existence. You cannot model it." He nodded to Sue-G. She tapped her pad. From every broken speaker in the plaza, from every Valkyrie comms device she had infected for days, a sound erupted. It was not one sound. It was 100. A roaring football crowd. A crying baby. A thunderstorm. A traditional drumming rhythm. A woman singing off-key. All at once, layered into a crashing wave of pure human noise, the Valkyrie lines flinched. It was a tiny, collective shudder. Their perfect circle wavered for a second as the sound assaulted their sensitive hearing and their logic. Then, from the ruins, the people came. Not soldiers. They were old men and women, teenagers, shopkeepers whose stores were gone. They carried no guns. They carried cans of paint, hammers, pots and pans. They screamed. They did not scream words. They screamed a vast, wordless cry of grief and fury. They ran not a Valkyrie, but into the plaza, painting bright. Messy streaks on the clean white ground, banging their metal pans together in a terrible, joyful drumming. Chaos, raw and beautiful, flooded the Volukri order. Krival gave a sharp command. The soldiers raised their weapons to disable, to stun. Minsu fired. But he did not fire at the soldiers. He fired his remaining plasma rounds at the base of the tall, decorative light poles that lined the plaza. They fell like giant trees across the avenues, blocking the Volukri reinforcements. Creating a maze of debris, the Volukri soldiers tried to contain the rushing civilians. But their tactics were for capturing soldiers. How do you capture a grandmother who is splashing purple paint on your boots? How do you stun a child who is hiding and laughing? Jay walked forward through the chaos, toward Krival. Volukri guards moved to stop him. Suji sent localized power surges to their weapons, making them spark and fizzle in their hands. One guard lunged, and Jay didn't block. He embraced the tackle, rolling with it, coming up covered in dust and throwing dirt into the guard's crystal eyes. He reached the clear space before the spire. Krival was there, its calm finally broken. This proves nothing. It cried, its voice sharp. This is just noise. Data without meaning. It is the meaning. Jay yelled over the cacophony. You wanted to cure us of war? This is what you would have to cut out. He spread his arms to take in the screaming, singing, painting madness. The joy, the grief, the love for things that are messy and ours. You cannot have our peace by removing our soul. You just make us into empty, quiet things. And we refuse to be empty. Krival stared, its crystal eyes reflecting the swirling colors and movement. For a moment, Jay saw not an enemy, but a being confronted with something truly alien for the first time. Not violence, spirit. A young man with a spray paint darted past, tagging the base of the Volukri spire with a looping, chaotic scrawl of neon green dot. Something in Krival seemed to fracture. It was not a limb this time. It was a belief. The logical end of this scenario was not a victory. It was a permanent, unmanageable stain. They could stun every human here, but the message, the terrible, illogical message, was already broadcast. The Volukri ships above did not fire. Their soldiers held their sparking weapons, unsure. The order to simply kill everyone had not been given, because that was not their purpose. Their purpose was to create a perfect, painless order. And here was proof, screaming and bleeding in bright colors, that such an order was impossible. Krival looked at its own stained, broken arm. It looked at the blue fluid that had dried there. It looked at the vibrant, chaotic green paint on its monument. It looked at Park Jae, standing firm in the storm of his own people's making. We? Krival began, its voice faltering. We understood combat. Jay lowered his arms, breathing heavily. The noise around them began to settle, the energy spent. He met the alien's gaze. You understood the mechanics, Jay said, his voice quiet but carrying. The dance of death. But you didn't understand the dancers. You never learned that sometimes we fight not to win, but to say, we are here. You had to try to take that away from us to see it. And to see it, he finished, looking at the blue stain on Krival and the green paint on the spire, you had to bleed for it. The Volukri forces began to pull back, not in a rout, but in a slow, confused withdrawal. The ships lifted silently into the sky. The soldiers turned and walked away, back to their clean lines and perfect logic, leaving the messy, painted, cheering plaza behind. The war was not over that day. But it changed. The Volukri did not leave Earth, but their certainty was gone. They began to talk, not just dictate. They had encountered a variable their logic could not resolve. Park Jae stood in the painted plaza, Kim Soo-ji and Choi Min-soo beside him. They were tired, they were hurt, They were hungry, but they were not quiet, and they were not empty. They had reminded an empire of perfect thinkers about the power of a single bleeding, unbeaten heart. They had shown them that some things cannot be understood, only felt. And sometimes feeling hurts.